Joanne Peterson, and my mother was Sammy Hotchkiss, who was born on the Hotchkiss homestead in Kelowna, and her father was Verdi Hotchkiss, who was the son of Roswell Hotchkiss, one of the three brothers who came to this area in the 1800s from, basically at that point it was Nebraska. They were born in New York, but then they came from Nebraska. And you know Enos Hotchkiss, you know, that is one of the brothers. My great-grandfather was Roswell, which was one of the three brothers, and then there was Preston. So most noted is Enos right here because Hotchkiss. I know that Mary Farmer wrote a book, and it is a great book about the Hotchkiss brothers. And she has, before, publications would have different information, and you'd go, well, is it this or is it that? You know, and she really clarified a lot. And in my life, the first born of Verdi Hotchkiss at the homestead in Kelowna was my Aunt Bernice. And she's one of these women who has total recall of everything in her life. Everything. Mm-hmm. How the the table was set for Thanksgiving. She's just an amazing woman. And she passed away in 2006 at the age of just a month before her 104th birthday. So she is the one who would tell us the history of the family and what they did and the personal side of the family, which was such a thrill. And and when, you know, you'd say, well, tell me more about this or that, should end up with a 16-page letter that would tell you, you know, about this particular person. But the whole family, the three brothers, two brothers came out earlier, Enos and Preston, and they were here in 1877 or 1873. The dates don't, you know, align. But they moved basically to Portland, which is right outside of Ridgway. It was called Portland. You even see it on your GPS, Portland. And then my great-grandfather, Roswell, joined them a couple years later. He moved to, and then he definitely came to Portland in 1877. And there they opened a general store. And it was the Hotchkiss Brothers General Merchandise Store. And then they moved that store to Ridgway in 1891. All three brothers they loved business. On the way, they had a sawmill, a flour mill, many land deals, smaller land deals. They were true pioneers. They were ready to go to new frontiers, do new things, develop businesses, get really involved in communities, and really help the community. They saw themselves as a part of a whole. They were pretty amazing. They opened the general store in Portland, moved to Ridgway. It was called the Hotchkiss Brothers General Merchandise Store. And in that location, he was also in Ridgway, the Postmaster General for years. Then, in 1881, when the Indians were removed from the Uncompahgre Valley, they filed a declaration of occupancy on 160 acres, and that's where the homestead is in Kelowna. And worth noting, Roswell was very friendly with Chief Uray. They were friends. And you know, Chief Uray was a very peaceful man. And my great-grandfather even, Chief Uray gave him his headdress and his personal trunk as a sign of friendship. So he he was very open to people, very caring to people, open to people, and I think that's what made the family so important in every community that they were in. Highly respected merchants, successful farmers, and stock growers in Montrose County. They were some of the original cattlemen here, and they had cattle and they had sheep, which usually doesn't mix, but they did. They had both. Then his son, Verdi Hotchkiss, who's my grandfather, continued to live on the homestead in Kelowna, continued to raise cattle. He was president of the Uncompahgre Valley Cattle and Horse Growers Association, and he was also county commissioner. And he held those positions for many years until his death. They talked about, right before Verdi's death, he was so tired and worn out from, his attempt, he wanted to provide work for unemployed men in his district. Commissioner Hotchkiss foresaw almost everything else and gave his last days to the cause of the unfortunate. When he called the daily press, he stated that he was not feeling well and said he had been down and out for a week or more. He said, the editor here said, "I've seen him in many trying situations. I've seen him doing work for other folks for a long time. I have noted that he has a big heart in him, a heart that beat in harmony for his fellow man. I've seen him worried sick because he could not give men employment for the county or under the CWA, and he knew they needed work so badly." And so he goes on, and he says he had a great amount of friends, and he was never known to throw a friend down. He knew the value of sturdy honesty and lived that kind of life. And he goes on to say that the load of trying to help people find work who had no work basically killed him. That's a good person, isn't it? Yeah. There's some really great articles about when Verdi Hotchkiss, my grandfather, died. And I guess it was the largest funeral that they had ever had. Just huge amount of people. He was highly respected. He always ready to help, a helping hand. The community really helped each other. And the leading members of that community were really fixed on doing the right thing for their community and working some very difficult situations out, so it was good for everyone. Then after that, his son actually stayed on the homestead for many years, and until he just couldn't make it work. So he had to sell it, and he sold it to the Jetsons, who I understand still own the homestead and is very much like it was. You know, it's standing right now. Even the fence that they built are standing on the homestead. Verdi was described as a man unafraid to enter the great experience, a man who lived in the community from pioneers' days, whose life was a spirit of a sturdy pioneer, and was one of the riders into the Cherokee Indian Strip when it was open, and then he ventured to the Klondike Gold Rush for a couple years. So he really, even though he was a very stable family man, he was willing to really take risks and a real pioneer in nature. And then so much of the personal aspect of Roswell and then his son Bertie was passed on by my aunt, like I had said earlier. And when you would ask a question, she could tell you dates, anything. I don't know how she did it. She was amazing. She had a very simple life, and I think that helped her keep her mind so intact for forever until her death. And then she would write letters on the personal side about the experiences at the homestead. Just really, really great experiences. There were 5 children, 4 girls, 1 son, and how they got into everything. They tried to drive a wagon. The horse took off with them. People had to get on their horses and race to stop the wagon with the girls in it. I mean, it was just everything. It was just quite a kick. But so her letters would be about how they went to cow camp, what happened at cow camp. And that was right up to Elk Creek, right off the highway in Ridgeway, right outside of Ridgeway. That's where they would take their cattle in the summer. And how the girls would get on a horse, well, except my mom, who was the baby, would get on horses and help their dad, drive the cattle up to the high country. And they would, she had a story about how their cow dog, who they loved, he'd get his feet really almost raw going to cow camp, and how they made booties for him. And, things like that. It was really wonderful. And she was also, my aunt, Bernice, was also my mother's first grade teacher at the Kelowna schoolhouse. So quite a span of ages in the family. She also would write stories about, the big story that I love was about Billy Luna, a young black, he was supposedly half black, half Navajo Indian, who showed up at the ranch and ended up living there, until he was an adult male, complete, and a very important part of the family. She also wrote about my mom, who was my Aunt Bernice, was my mother's first grade teacher. Of course, my mom was a little snot, right? Her sister was the teacher, so, all the trouble that my mother would get into. And so my aunt would keep my mom back after school, but her horse Daisy would take off without her, and how she had to walk home. Just really cute stories like that, as well as my aunt's many of her what she calls miracles in her life. She drove off Box Canyon and not only survived, but was able to climb up that rock cliff. How? Nobody knows. Nobody has ever known. With her purse. But it's a true, I think we have somewhat lost it in my generation, but my mom's generation, all of her brothers and sisters, they continued that pioneer spirit. There was nothing that they couldn't do, or when there was a problem or a issue, nothing that they couldn't find a way to handle.